another episode of Three Wise DMs, the podcast for three dungeon masters who've been doing this for way too long. Talk about all the things we do to try to make our games as good as they can be.
Hi, I'm Tony.
And it's me, DM Dave, the rock and roll DM. So, before we begin this episode, since this is our first one back, and before we introduce all our guests, I wanted to take a second and express our heartfelt thank you to all of you listening right now, to this community that has sprung up around this thing we have called Three Wise DMs. Tony and I weren't sure what we were going to do with the podcast after Thorin died last year, but the absolutely humbling outpouring of grief, condolences, the donation in Thorin's honor, and the many wishes that Three Wise DMs continued on was beyond touching. So we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. We're going to be releasing episodes regularly, but maybe not as regularly as we used to. It's going to take quite a while to fill the hole that Thorin's absence creates. But we're trying. It's for that reason that our friend is going to continue, as he just did, introducing us each episode. Also in that respect, we've decided that today's episode requires 7 people to handle that job. As a companion piece to episodes 75 and 76, we're doing our absolutely, we promise, this is totally the ending, there's nothing more to see here, wrap up of our Curse of Strahd campaign, which is surprising since we kind of started Curse of Strahd immediately upon starting the podcast. So here we go. So without further ado, well, I'm back in black. Yeah.
Finally, what I know.
Black,
wow.
So obviously, that is AC/DC. Yes. Thank you. I'm going to explain why. That's the dovetail to this episode because, one, we're back in black, and we are actually going back to black because we're going to be talking about the terrible otherworldly entity known as Vampyr and the absolute final finale episode of Curse of Strahd. So with that said, Tony, we already know who you played, but if you wanted to go over that again in our Curse of Strahd.
Yes, I played the very thinly veiled version of Hawk, who was in no way directly linked to Hulk Hogan. It wasn't, it was really subtle. You had to really be looking into it hard to see the similarities.
Absolutely. And that was only for the first half of the campaign, because the second half, he was a thinly veiled impersonation of He-Man. But
yes, he multi-classed.
I digress. We also have here a return guest to the Curse of Strahd campaign, Chris.
Hey, Chris. I played Sir Alared Scar, the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, who eventually took ownership of Argynvost Holt and the newly formed Order of the Silver Dragon.
Ooh, yeah, baby. Bonnie, this is also a return guest to our Curse of Strahd campaign.
I mean, do I really need introductions at this point?
Yes, do it.
So I'm Bonnie, a.k.a. Little One, and she did so many shenanigans that you all have heard about and will continue to hear about, as she will never die.
She lives on in all multiverses. Let's go actually over to, from the very beginning. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join us for the players wrap-up of Curse of Strahd, but Beth, our resident cleric.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I was a Telflame cleric. My name was Fenris, and my divine dominion was the Grave Dominion, which is the Samantha's Guide to Everything.
Yeah, absolutely. The Grave Cleric, which was a super cool class to play with, especially with some of the spells you started to take from the supplement materials as well, which we might get into. Next up, let's talk to Scott here, which you've heard from our wrap-ups in Woodstock Wanderers. You heard of his exploits in that as both Has-Been and Adelard the Bard. But Scott, how did you join in on this?
Well, you had asked me if I'd be willing to help out with the big finale by running the monsters, or at least some of the monsters, and I thought that would be fun. I hadn't had any involvement in the campaign up to this point, but I readily agreed to that. But then, sort of at the last minute, things got switched around where Matt was going to take over the monsters. And I was asked to run a pair of high-powered NPCs who would be helping the party out, the Summer Knight and the Winter Knight, who are like real high level, far higher level than anything I've ever run before. But it seemed like it would be fun, so I said sure, and so I joined in for not just the last session, but the next to last session as well.
Yeah, the penultimate one too, as well. Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into our final guest for today's huge blowout, Matt, who you guys have heard of, but now you actually get to hear of. So, Matt, what were you playing? How were you in?
Yep, so I'm Matt, and Dave had requested that I come in and be a Monster Wrangler and help out just because...
Official title.
Well, I totally lifted Monster Wrangler from Matt Colville, but it's a great tool. So, Matt, please.
Come in and run some of the monsters just to kind of take some of the pressure off, I guess, the number of players and number of things that were going on. And for me, that was definitely pretty cool because being a younger player myself, not a lot of experience with the game, playing NPCs on that side was a wildly different perspective. So thank you.
No, yeah. So, I mean, going into that, because I think that's a great piece right there that I think is really, really actionable for everyone out there. Because I had you come in originally during our Dinner with the Devil session where we all had the big dinner party. We have the article up on the website. We talk about it in our wrap-ups. But you came in as Rahadin and Escher, the vampire consort, originally. And then you came back again, Monster Wrangling, for this huge epic finale, running some serious monsters. So, like, what was how did you kind of run that? Because I kind of gave you, just said, these are the people, what do you want to do?
I was thinking about that coming up to this, and I think the biggest difference that I could pick out was just what I can think of as how a DM would run it. You have a different take on how you want the campaign to run, and you don't necessarily want to just TPK everyone. Whereas I'm coming in on a player side, and I really want to hit every time, and I want to do maximum damage, So I think in that regard, that's a big shift. And then just playing the different side. You're now not on the good side, you are on the bad side, and that is fun in its own right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, what were your thoughts on that? As a kind of fellow DM and having experienced this kind of NPC, but as a player.
It's kind of like, as I said before, when you're playing without a net, because now you have a Monster Wrangler, and as a DM, I can't even tell you how many times I've pulled back in my head, I'm like, wow, that last encounter, shit the bed.
Yeah.
Maybe I should do this next, even more ridiculous encounter. And you have this guy who's a Monster Wrangler, and he's using 5 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember Thor talking about that at one point too. He made the point, he's running them like player would. He's not running them like a DM where you're just I'm going to run them into the heroes a little bit. I'm going to do these, I'm going to make it hard.
Softer strategy.
Little bit sometimes, right? At least the way we play it, right?
Oh no, the wizard's got 3 hit points. I'm going at him. Full multi-attack.
Let's say, Dave, from a DM perspective, though, there was, in that finale battle, there was a lot of creatures, a lot of different sort of scenes along the way. Does it help to have someone, I get lost often in combat sometimes, especially as you start to include more and more people, and then there's more people show up and whatnot. Does it help? I mean, or is it, to their point, is it like you have to be careful because you just given somebody the keys to the Cadillac?
5 rounds.
They're going to go tearing it around town.
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. I think because the way when I used it was the Dinner with the Devil, which was going to be massive because I had to role play Strahd, which was, he's easily the most iconic villain in D&D, right? And also I had to figure out what we're going to do in the castle, and I had a lot of things going on in the background. So having Matt come in as Rahadin and Escher gave them more weight, I think, than I could have. I would have played them very, okay, they're going to hit you with their sword. Okay, back to what Strahd is trying to do, right? For the epic final battle with Vampyr and Xantris the Kingmaker and Sariash the Hellhound Whisperer and Vaughn the Evasive all out there, plus the Bale Wing, my weird eldritch horror thing that the Rock had been transported into. Not Dwayne Johnson, but the actual huge, gigantic condor bird.
He wasn't available.
I couldn't have possibly run all of that and done it justice for what we had in the epic finale. So why don't we go into that, like with this epic, like describe it out. What were your guys' thoughts on what you walked into? Let's just start over here. Let's go with Bond first. What were your thoughts as you walked in? Because none of you, outside of Scott and Matt, knew anything of what was about to happen.
Well, knowing Scott and seeing what he has done for just the minis, especially with what I tend to kind of come up with in my mind, which is in some ways sort of crazy artistic.
Right.
It's impressive. So when you said he was building the final scene, I wasn't expecting what he ended up coming with, but at the same time,
neither was I.
I expected him to shock us, which is what he did. When I came downstairs after it was all set up, I was like, holy crap, this is on.
And you guys can see, we had posted some of the pics from that last game with some of the terrain. And we're going to delve into that deeper in some later episodes with Scott, too. But, I mean, that's kind of that was the big... it
was amazing.
The big explosion. So why don't we go to the man himself next? Scott, I mean, you already knew what was going on, but... What was your take on how that went down?
I mean, as far as the terrain goes?
Yeah, and how that kind of played out, how it kind of helped or didn't help it didn't.
Well,
it totally helped the final.
Those of you who've looked at the pictures, you saw that the terrain setup for this final confrontation was a large terrain piece, and it started with this mountain pass leading up to the gate, and then through a gate, and then across a bridge, and then finally up to the Amber Temple. And Dave had supplied me with some ideas as to what it was supposed to look like, some images he had, and a general map, and so building it, I had to look from the practicality. Can people actually get close enough to move their figures around? Are the figures going to stand up, or are they going to fall off? And then I talked with Dave a good bit, saying, well, gee, I'm going to all this effort to build this thing. What's preventing the characters from just teleporting from the starting location to the very end and skipping everything in between?
A very real concern.
That was a little concerning, but we worked some things out regarding that, and so it looked as though we would set up a very interesting sequence of encounters within the encounter as the characters fought their way from the beginning all the way through across the bridge and to the end, and that was obviously what we were trying to come up with, something that would be very challenging and entertaining and awesome, from start to finish, and as it turned out, I think we succeeded.
So how about continuing player-wise, like Chris, Beth, Tony, your guys' thoughts on because I kind of led you all in and had you not see it. I led you in, but eyes closed, and then brought you in front of it to open up to see this final encounter to a really long-running campaign that had some really big moments.
No, I mean, it was crazy. And you did, you kind of covered my eyes in from the door and brought us in there to see it. And it was, we've been playing D&D for, we started in, Biskevich's basement, right? And, stuff like that. And we played Roll20 and all kinds of stuff. And that one was the first time I legitimately felt sort of like a professional D&D player or something like that. There was a part where the bridge was, and you can see in some of the pictures where there's, I guess, cotton and whatnot, it's underneath it, but you're on the bridge and you're looking down there, and it looks like it's a bridge over this endless sort of cloudy chasm. It was really something different. It made it an incredibly memorable experience.
Yeah. Tone.
So I wish I could have told my nerdy self, back when I was picking up the red box, that one day I would, as a child, I would get to play at a table like this all these years in the future, because I would have been pretty freaking stunned by that news. Yeah, it was amazing. I won't dish too hard on it because we are going to go into terrain later. But I looked at it like, wow, this is truly amazing. And then I'm like, I better go look at my character sheet because I'm going to need everything. Absolutely everything.
Digging deep.
Yeah,
right?
Great. Okay, let me go read.
Beth, so you're definitely one of the newer players to D&D in the group, and you've seen, battle maps and minis and stuff before. We've played with that in some of the family games that we've talked about on the cast and stuff. But this was your first time probably seeing that type of level of terrain. What did you take from that? What were your thoughts on that?
I absolutely loved it because I'm a big visual person, and especially as a newer player, and a particular battle could last 3 or 4 rounds in one section. Like when the monsters were going on top of the bridge, and 3 turns later, is the guy still up there? It helps you remember where everything is when you do it.
No, absolutely. We talked about that a lot. The difference between theater of the mind and having, your normal old battle mats out, and then something like this that has 3 dimensions to it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go around the table then. Now, Scott, you had an idea at least what we were walking into. This was your play set. But what did that feel like from a player perspective, though? Hey, I built these custom figs, I built the terrain, and now I'm squaring off against this.
Well, I hadn't really had any contact or direct involvement with the campaign. I certainly heard you guys talking about it a lot. I was listening to the podcast, of course. So, I came into it, not really with any preconceived notions. I had to assume, I knew the lineup of the bad guys because, Dave had given it to me so I could make up the figures for it.
With that too, Scott, you had said, I was like, now don't try not to metagame and you're like, I don't even know what I was looking at when you sent me the stats for these guys.
Yeah. So it was a surprise. That's great.
It was pretty daunting. I mean, I had experience with, lower level campaigns, and I was thinking, well, boy, I'm sure glad I'm not trying to fight these guys. But honestly, I didn't know, you hadn't told me anything at all about, the sequence of the encounters. I knew what the lineup was on the other side, but I had no idea, if you're going to throw them at the characters one at a time or 2 at a time or all at once or how it was going to work. So, I was in a bit of suspense there. And I had my 2 NPCs that I was in charge of, and just figured, well, they'll bash anything they can get close to, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Absolutely.
Because in the previous encounter you had been in, we really had done the game before that. We stopped the opponents. They showed up at Scar's Keep, and we just laid them out. So we're calling it off a win.
Oh my God, that was horrific. You stomped their. Oh, you
right?
stomped them. Yeah.
Don't mess with my house. Yeah. Get out.
Yeah. No, Lord did not appreciate that. But, this immediately had a completely different vibe. The first battle, Dave dropped what statistically felt like a Baylor and his friends. So that had to be like a CR 20, 6 encounter. Honestly, it was heavy. They came please.
Absolutely. The thing that surprised me the most, tell you the truth, out of all of that, was I was imminently concerned, and I'll probably send out the stats that I use for these. They were the dark powers in essence, and then I had, as we've talked about, I kind of took some of what Lunch Break Heroes on YouTube does with Vampyr to kind of create this larger arc past Strahd, and I kind of hot rodded it from there. So I'll probably send those stats up. So I was completely ready to have a mechanic in there where I was going to long rest you guys instantaneously. before the battle with Vampyr. And it was going to play into, you guys had just been in the Fae Court, you had gotten you had gone to the Court of Stars, you had gotten the favor of Morwell, the Eladrin Queen, and she was going to do the Galadriel thing to Scar, literally. And I was going to be like, in the darkest nights, all that, right?
Yes.
And spoiler alert, that never happened. So this group, level 17, I think, right? Were you guys level 17? Mowed through over 2,000 hit points of villains without a short or long rest. So
I think
if you guys want to jump in on what that felt like, I know what it feels like on the DM side. What did it feel like on the player's side in that way? Why don't we start over with Beth? Your thoughts, because this was probably one of the biggest knockdown dragouts, high level play things that you've done. So what did it feel like on your end as a player? Me knowing that you guys are mowing through these guys, right? But what did it feel like on the other side of the screen?
Well, as a new player, I always want to help cause damage first, and then as a cleric, then be the cleric and help you guys, because I just, that's me. But
some clerics like to punch.
This time, it was tough. I died a couple of times. You guys had to keep me alive so I can, help you guys.
Oh no, that's so true. You actually stayed down for 3 rounds straight, and everyone was just fighting over your corpse. Yeah.
Yeah.
She wasn't dead.
It was mostly dead.
Yeah, no, you have to keep your feet up.
Ron, how about you? What did it feel like on the player's side? Like I said, so many times the DM, when you're behind the screen, you're seeing where the hit points are, you're seeing where the villains really are, you're gauging what the players still have in the chamber. Mm-hmm. So the tension is not the same on that side. But on the other side, that psychology of the screen really changes stuff. So what did it feel like as you guys were fighting up the, in essence, pagoda of the Ember Temple?
Well, for me, it's a couple different thoughts, because I didn't know what the hit points were.
Sure.
I obviously knew there was legendary actions and things like that, because when you think you did a good job, it didn't work, kind of thing.
Yeah.
On the DM side, I know that these things can be very powerful. But as a player, it's a little different for me to answer that, because as a player who's truly in character, especially Little One, I'm oblivious to what's happening. I'm just trying to keep Cuteness safe and allow Cuteness to do something that won't cause her to die, since we see what happens when she dies, as well as trying to hit, but then also trying to support. So for my side, it felt a little crazy and chaotic, because every time I would send Cuteness to go give somebody something healing, I was like, just don't die. And then I'm focused more on that. So in some ways for me, I was just being me. So I have kind of no idea what was happening ultimately. I just know there was stuff happening everywhere. And I kept seeing my BFF, Hawk, trying to get to the guy on the mountain, and the guy on the mountain kept moving from him. So, he never would make it.
Yeah.
Like a punch, he did.
No, absolutely. That was actually, Tony, give me a sense here, because we have talked so much about this campaign and about DMing and all this on the cast, coming from that, and also having done a good chunk of high level play, because this is really some of the first high level play we've done in 5e up to this point. We had done some in Woodstock, and now Strahd. We just hadn't reached that level of high level, final tier stuff. So in that way, coming as an experienced DM, but also being on the other side of the screen, what did it feel like in terms of the encounter building itself, the final culmination?
So it felt very satisfying. We didn't just blow through a sequence of meaningless encounters to get to Vampyr. We just didn't do that whole meat grinder. Every one of them was an individual challenge where we had to face off against these opponents who were kind of unknown. Actually, vastly unknown. We knew the dark powers. They were all very prominent spirits. They could really throw fists. They had a wide amount of abilities. And then after fighting a full 3 rounds of that, we got to Vampyr, who was, the big show. He was the main event. And he did not disappoint.
Yeah. So it felt like there was, it felt like a proper tense culmination. Like you really felt like you had to dig deep, and that was a satisfying conclusion to this.
Yeah, it didn't feel like we were just chopping through these. There was a sense of tension where we had to cut through these guys, so we weren't like basically pulling up to the Amber Temple on life support. That is not the scenario I wanted. I'm like, hey brother, can somebody hand me my rib? I'm gonna need this for this battle. Like that's not what I wanted.
Absolutely, and that was the thing. Like I kept saying too, like this was such a classic adventure, and we did such a great job with it. This team, like, of creating a really great story and we had the confrontation with Strahd and the whole Castle Ravenloft. Oh my God, this, and then it's like, okay, where do you go from there? So to try to build that out, I wanted it to be enough, right? And it sounded like it was generally. But Chris, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, number one, how it actually lends itself from the initial campaign, right? Like we did Strahd, but during Strahd, the seeds were planted and you were looking for opportunities to kind of have this be the culmination of it. And you'd actually busted out Vampyr earlier on. I think we were probably like 12th or 13th level or something, and basically just did the big bad thing where he shows up and just basically kicks our ass. And then luckily, like, takes off and leaves us alive there, right? So going into it, right, like, I'm thinking, like, oh, my God, we're going to have to, like, so we better hit Vampyr quick. And it's slowly, right, and it keeps on adding other guys, and you had the teleportation bit, which adds at certain points, it makes you really angry as a player, but it adds such a level with the terrain and everything. I mean, you literally knocked down everybody. I texted you after the game. You knocked down everybody in the party at least once during that battle, but yet we never long rested. I mean, I think the first one down was Fenris, right? And I'm like, oh my God, the cleric went down. Like we need healing, right? It was very tense and well staged. Like it kept moving, and you never really got a good rest there. Like it just moved on and on through the different areas there. It was really well done. Like as a DM, it's tough to make effective encounters, especially like that, but the way that you stacked monsters, and you couldn't really metagame around a lot of them. I didn't know about any of these things. It's not like you're fighting a bunch of like dragons or something. They're like these unknown sort of dark powers and Vampyr himself. So
I was happy though. I will say, like you did say that I would knock down everybody. The one thing I finally is after 17 levels, I finally dropped Hawk.
Yes, that right there.
With an intelligence of 3, I think you then had, or 1 or something, right? I got a devour mind thing, and I just took it was like an intelligence drain, and he just dropped onto his ass. I felt pretty.
You hit with the steel chair in my brain. Yeah, that was ugly. Roll 3d6. All right, I rolled pretty high. Great, that's how many intelligence points I lose. I'm like, great. Well, I'm down, drooling. That was ugly.
So,
I want to say, Sir Scar, you got the killing blow. How did it feel?
It was really cool. At the same time, it was really weird. Like, I'm like, you feel a little bit out in front, and you're like, well, all right, this is the final blow here. This is the end of the thing. But, I mean, it was awesome. It was Vampyr. Like, after that first encounter with him, I figured he's like CR 35 or something like that. Like, it was like... Right? Like we jumped up on him and it was like I was vomiting like worms and stuff for like the rest of the day there, right? So like it was really cool. I don't know, it was such a great campaign. Like I think we probably talked about it when we did the wrap the first time, but the mixed role play, I had like a character arc, and we actually continued and finished the character arcs there with Hawk and Scar and Thorn's character and everybody. Like it was it was everything you would want out of a long-term epic campaign, especially with a super high-level finale with terrain and like a crazy battle with monsters from beyond.
So just so we know that I'm not going to just take all these like kudos, but thank you. This is awesome. But I want to actually throw a question out on that point, Chris, because that was a big thing was there was a lot of story and a lot of character development through the whole campaign that I started to plant seeds in the very first 2 sessions. The seeds were already planted for where we were going, and we've talked about that a lot. But one of my regrets for this is I kind of brought everyone full circle except Fenris. And I could not find a place to put where I saw Fenris's character going, which I had planted some things, and we made the joke about the Baby Walter thing and all of this. But there was like a whole big story that came out of that unfortunately now you guys, I just gave you a bunch of lore about it and what happened, and you're like, all right, well, we got to go fight fucking Vampyr. So too bad, Beth. Keep going, right? So Beth, in that way, like everyone had this like big story arc that felt, I felt like it kind of felt complete, except yours. So as a player, like, is that something that you kind of like, that sucked in terms of that? Like, how did that feel as a player? Did it feel like you were missing out what some of the other players were getting?
No, not really, because not knowing one, but it was kind of depressing not knowing what happened to Baby Walter. Like, I had to keep asking about it.
Right.
And especially when made little one forget about Baby Walter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a whole point where you sold memories at the Goblin Market. Yeah. But yeah, it was unfortunate because I had dropped out, and so that's a good question too about lore with this type of stuff when you're getting closer to high level play, and there are certain things that I was building out that you were not going to be able to get to at level 15, 16. If you went there, you're going to die, right? It's not going to feel satisfying. So like with the Fenris, with her character arc, I literally saw it like this was super high level stuff because, again, spoiler alerts, I had kind of dropped this out, but Baby Walter's soul was now kind of under the auspice of Asmodeus in the Nine Hells because of issues being the soul of the Morning Lord, which I can get into for people, but it was a whole thing. But that's high level play. You're dropping down to fight literally the devil himself. So I couldn't drop it on you on like 13th level, right?
Right.
But so it didn't feel like incomplete in that way?
No. I knew it was like a storyline, but then when we all decided to go the path that we did, I was like, all right,
we got to do this, yeah.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you guys? Like in terms of like I was trying, and we talked about lore dumps and how they can be their own worst enemy. Like I was starting to try to drop that out, so at least there was the understanding of where that story was leading. Did that stuff come through at all in your minds?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
For me, sometimes. But also for me, the way that I play, I'm not necessarily one that's like front and center, where I will take the lore or storyline,
take the initiative
and
on
force it through.
Right.
So some of the more stronger, I don't want to say stronger players because I feel like I'm a strong player, but stronger in-game personalities probably picked up on that a lot more, where I focused on little things like Baby Walter until I forgot, or even that Fenris wanted to marry people that we never did,
right.
So like the little fun, quirky storylines, I think I pick up more than what everybody else picks up on.
That's a good point, because with this adventure, like it did not really lend itself, maybe earlier on, but like Barovia by its very nature doesn't allow for some of that kind of, like we were just talking about this last night at the Dragonlance game, that kind of level of whimsical D&D stuff that you get to have in towns and villages and with weird people. Like Barovia didn't lend itself to it. And then when you're going high level play and you're fighting against these like titanic things, it doesn't really lend itself to it either. So that was, I feel like that might have been a shortcoming of just the overall setting. What do you guys think? Is that like, in terms of just some settings are just not, they don't fit with certain types of play, obviously. I mean, as simple as that sounds, as logical as that sounds.
I mean, Strahd, it's obviously a gothic sort of thing. It has that flavor to it, so it doesn't lend itself to whimsy. But they have plenty of published adventures that have much more of a whimsical kind of edge to it,
Sure.
and stuff like that. It's you can always bake it in a little bit, but it's a little weird in vampires and stuff like that. Like vampires, and there was a Frankenstein guy and a mummy guy in there. That's a little tough.
Oh yeah,
a little tough for whimsy.
No Abbott Costello.
It's like that. Yeah. It's like Laurel and Hardy meet the.
Yeah, it was the Universal monsters. Like I wanted to play with all of them, So, but yeah,
sometimes it's nice to have something that grounds you. because you can't have back-to-back dramatic scenes like this is terrifying and this is horrifying because you can't maintain that intensity.
Absolutely. But we've talked a lot about with the adventure and how, like Chris, you were making the point that like seeds had been planted that built into this kind of end game run. But that was kind of the point, is that Strahd and most of the published adventures out there, pretty much any of them. I think the only thing that'll take you further is like the Rise of Tiamat, like the Tyranny of Dragons duel adventure. Nothing else takes you. It takes you 10th, 11th level, maybe 12th to 13th, depending on how you're running it, right? But it kind of stops you right there. And then everyone kind of goes, well, now what?